Okay, good afternoon, bird class. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I was having some problems with my microphone earlier today. All right. So it looks like everybody's feeling a little bit frazzled about the end of the semester. I'm right there with you guys. I've got a lot of stuff I'm desperately behind on, and fortunately with this class, we're not so much on a push towards a cumulative final exam or anything like that. Oh, and I see Chelsea is in her last semester. Congratulations, Chelsea. Oh, Taylor too. Lots of you guys. Yeah. Congratulations, everybody. This is often one of the last courses you guys take. No, Mary, there's no final test of everything. Basically, what do we have? We have a regular quiz and a regular short answer question this week. And next week, good Lord, next week's the last week. And that's going to have a review quiz and a review short answer similar to basically we've had those before. Review quizzes, review short answers that cover just a couple of weeks worth of stuff. And that's that. And yes, next week is the last week. Our last class is May 5th, I think it is. All right. So we've been talking about wild birds, and we were talking about nesting locations, and how nesting locations of wild birds can cause problems for people, especially when the birds become aggressive, like, hey, Fidget, what are you doing? Sorry, my cats are having a little squabble. They usually get along very well. Okay, but a lot of people just don't like the fact that birds are nesting on their property near their house. You do get a lot of feces in an area where birds are nesting. But guess what? There are laws about this. Legally, you cannot move an active bird nest. What is an active bird nest? Once an egg is laid, the nest is considered active. So if the birds are building a nest and it's somewhere that's really problematic, you can remove the nest before eggs are laid. Now, this can be tricky because, of course, they're trying to hide their nests. And a lot of times they can build a nest in one day. It's really a fast process. So it's not like you have a lot of time before the eggs are laid. Okay. Now, if you're me And hopefully you guys, I get excited when there's a bird nest on my property. The juncos have been nesting in one of my pots on my back patio. They raised at least 2 fledglings, and now they're sitting on eggs again. There's at least 4 eggs in there now. The poor plant, yeah, it's dying. That's it. I haven't been watering it because I don't want to just harm the birds, disturb their nesting. So, you know, it's a plant. It doesn't have a nervous system. I'm enjoying watching them. I'm enjoying the whole process. I can buy a new plant. It's not a big deal. Yeah. Wrens in particular love nesting in hanging baskets. This one is actually a pot on the ground, which is, you know, juncos are ground nesters, so that makes sense, but it was kind of a surprise to me. Okay. Make sure you remember that. All right, I'm going to clear this screen because this kind of wraps up problems that birds cause that affect people. And we're going to start talking about problems that people cause that affect birds. And we're going to start with some of the, well, a lot of these are big problems. So first off, lawn chemicals. A lot of lawn companies will come out and they will spray your lawn with pesticides, herbicides, and they'll put down fertilizers. And a lot of these can be harmful. So any chemicals used outside the house can get into the food chain. So pesticides kill insects. Well, birds will eat insects that have been exposed to pesticide but haven't died yet. So that can end up doing 2 things. One is accidentally poisoning the birds. And the other one is reducing birds' food supply, both of which are significant problems. There is, despite what companies will tell you, no pesticide that is 100% safe for people, pets, and wildlife. None. They'll try and tell you that. Okay, hang on a second. Fidget. Fidget's being a real brat. Okay, we'll see how long that lasts. All right, so that is largely with insecticides. Those are a huge, huge problem. And people put them on the lawn to try and make sure they have a perfect monoculture lawn, but people will also do it because, oh my goodness, we wouldn't want insects in the house. Oh, it would be so horrible if we had insects in the house. Yeah. Folks, you got insects in your house. You just have to make sure you don't have too many insects in your house. And wood-eating insects, you definitely have to deal with, like termites. But the occasional spider, the occasional other type of insect, really, they're not going to do you a lot of damage. They don't carry a lot of diseases. And if you see a spider this size, it's not going to kill you. It's going to try and run away from you. All right. If you want a screenshot of this, take one real quick. Next up is rodenticides. Anything that ends in "cide" is a poison. So pesticide, herbicide, rodenticide. So this is something that specifically targets rodents, and it is a chemical. Again, this moves up the food chain. Rat poison, mouse poison, it's going to go into the food chain. These usually kill slowly. So the rat or the mouse that has eaten the poison has a good chance of getting outside of your house. And they can end up going outside and either getting caught by a predator or dying. So a lot of dogs, cats, and wildlife end up with what's called secondary rodenticide poisoning. We see this a lot in wild hawks, owls, bobcats, and I might have mentioned this. I mentioned this to one class. Recently in California, there was a litter of 4 mountain lion cubs found. The mom had disappeared. 2 of them died, and it turned out that they died because of rodenticide poisoning. So people trying to kill rats and mice are killing all kinds of wildlife and pets, you know, yours or your neighbors. I'm not a big fan of putting out poisons for killing animals of any kind, if you can't tell. Go ahead and take a screenshot. Is there a cure for secondary rodenticide poisoning? There are treatments. There's not a guarantee that they will work. They don't always work. But there are things that you can do to reduce or to help the animal survive secondary poisoning. When I was doing wildlife rehab, when we would get bobcats in, they always had rodenticide poisoning. I can't remember exactly how many we got in while I was working there. We only were able to save 1. The rest of them all didn't make it. So it's not pretty. Next up, window strikes or collisions. This is a problem primarily during migration. So most small songbirds migrate during the night. Rodent issue in Beverly, proposed building an owlery. Well, that's interesting. Certainly, barn owls are used in certain agricultural settings in California. A lot of almond growers put up barn owl boxes rather than just putting out poison, because the barn owls take the mice, the rats, the voles, and do a great job. And it's cheap and it's healthy. So big fan of owls. Okay, so during migration season, the small birds are flying at night and they're more likely to fly into windows. It's estimated that up to 1 billion birds are killed each year because they hit windows. Half of these are in houses and half tall buildings. Things like the kind of tall buildings you see in Boston, downtown. Big, massive bank buildings and office buildings and whatever. Birds don't understand windows and they don't really see the window. A lot of times they will see the reflection of trees. So if you've ever seen a reflection in a window, birds will see that and think, oh, there's some more trees on the other side. I'm going to just keep on going. If you have a bird hit your window, the best thing to do is pick them up, put them in a box, like a shoebox, keep them warm and quiet. Sometimes they recover, sometimes they don't. There's not a lot special that wildlife rehabbers can do in those situations. So if it doesn't recover quickly, that's a problem. Fiona, go ahead.
I had a bird. There's a lot of birds that fly into my windows over here, but I had this bird fly into my window before and it fell into a barrel outside. And I luckily was there and I got it and it was still like half alive. It was struggling and I held it for a while and I warmed it, like you said, and I got it like water and stuff to see if it wanted some. And eventually it was able to fly off on its own. So
Good.
but we have a lot of that over here. So it's really sad.
Well, I'm going to tell you how to prevent that.
Yep.
So there are two things that work really good at helping reduce window strikes. One is these UV stickers. So I've used these and they've worked fantastically. They don't look like this picture. In the real world, they're kind of faint. You can see them, but you usually don't notice them. It's kind of just a little bit opaque. That's because we can't see ultraviolet light. Birds can see ultraviolet light, and these stickers reflect ultraviolet light. So the birds see something that looks more like this, whereas for us, I've had people come over to my house and I've talked about these window stickers and they didn't even know I had them on the windows. They hadn't even noticed them. So that's one way you can do it. This is another way. This is called feather-friendly tape. This is just a series of dots that go across the window. They're pretty easy to apply. You can see it comes in a tape and you press it against the window and then you peel off the backing and the dots stick. And again, it's not as obvious as this image. Both of these can be seen by the birds and it really, really helps reduce bird strikes. Having exterior window screens helps. Tinted windows. Yeah, that's as far as, that doesn't do anything to reduce bird strikes. I don't know, it might even make it worse. Because if the bird is seeing plants reflected in the window, they're going to fly towards those plants. Okay, exterior screens helps. At night, especially in tall buildings, turning off the lights helps. For some reason, when the lights are on inside, the birds seem to be more likely to strike the window. And I don't know why large office buildings leave the lights on at night. Everybody's gone home. There's nobody working there. Why are all their lights on? I don't understand why they're doing that. Okay. Any more questions about bird strikes? All right, take a screenshot if you want it. Okay. People also frequently get hummingbirds in the house or in the garage. Hummingbirds like the color red, and they are going to come to things that are red, like my shirt. In your garage, if you have an automatic garage door opener, you're going to have this red handle hanging down. This is the unlock function, so you can release the garage door from the mechanism and manually close the door. But hummingbirds will see this and come in looking for food. If this is a problem, easy. Cover it with like duct tape or black electrical tape. If it's not red, the hummingbirds aren't going to care about it. If you have a hummingbird inside, placing something red underneath the opening of the garage door, leave the garage door open, place something red on the ground right there in the garage door opening, and then leave it alone. The hummingbird will go to whatever is red, and then they'll outside and off they can go. It actually works really good. Now, if the hummingbird has been trapped for a long period of time, you may need to feed it. So hummingbirds need to eat very, very, very frequently. So if the hummingbird is no longer flying, you can make your own hummingbird solution. 1 part water, or sorry, 1 part sugar, regular old sugar, plain sugar. 4 parts water. So I usually make it, I put a cup of water and a 1/4 cup of sugar. That's what 1 part to 4 part means. Microwave for 2 minutes. Let cool. And that is your hummingbird food right there. So you can make some of this up and put it in a dish and dip the hummingbird beak in it if the hummingbird is basically starving. Sometimes birds get into chimneys. Chimney swifts nest in chimneys. That's where their name comes from. So you might hear them. They get very noisy right before they fledge. Is there a certain type, excuse me. Is there a certain type of sugar? Table sugar, just regular old white table sugar. Yep. It's incredibly cheap to make it yourself. I always, you see it for sale at bird feeding stores and stuff. And I'm like, I can make this. It's not expensive. It's not hard. Okay, in the chimney. If there's a nest of chimney swifts and it's an active nest, you can't do anything about it. If you want to prevent chimney swifts or other birds from coming in, you need to get a chimney cap. So a lot of houses will have these, and it looks like just kind of a piece of metal that stands up a foot or so above the top of the chimney. That's to prevent birds from getting in. If it's too late, you have birds in the chimney. If they're chimney swifts, keep the damper closed so they don't get in the house. If it's some other type of bird, you might need to open the damper, because if it's not a chimney swift, it might have trouble getting out. So my experience with this was a pigeon. I had a pigeon come in the chimney when I was living in an apartment, and I had to open the damper, and the bird did not want to come down. So I didn't have any bird seed. I was in an apartment. I wasn't in a place where I was feeding the birds. So I got some bread, and I made a little crumb of breadcrumbs to the sliding glass door leading onto the balcony, left the door open, and let the bird figure the rest of it out for itself. And it worked. It came down, it ate some of the bread, and eventually ended up out on the patio. And I was able to close off everything and complain to the management about the fact that the chimney cap wasn't keeping the birds out right. If birds get inside your house, you want to close any blinds on windows, because bird strikes can happen from the inside, just like outside. Close the lids on all of the toilets. Open exterior doors, and give them time to find their own way out. It's usually not a problem, usually pretty easy. Okay. Any questions on this part? Take your screenshots. All right, so those are the most common problems that birds have, except for one. What other problem do you think there is that birds have that's caused by people? Where's my picture? Overeating, destroying their homes, definitely. What about this? Cats kill more wild birds than any of the other things I've described. And a lot of those cats are pets. But we're going to talk about that when we talk about wildlife rehabilitation. So we're going to come back to that topic. I know the idea of keeping cats indoors can be controversial. Frankly, I am a huge proponent of keeping cats indoors. I have 4. They're all strictly indoors. And I find that, indoor cats are healthier, they live longer, and they're not out there killing anything. And if you want to see just how miserable they are at being stuck inside, there's my office buddy. Yeah. Yeah, wildlife rehabilitation. You do wildlife rehab and you really understand what can happen, how much damage cats can do. Why keep the lid on the toilet down if birds are flying in the house? Yeah, they drown. If they end up in the toilet, they can drown. I knew somebody who lost a budgie that way. Okay, attracting wild birds to your yard. So there's not much controversy here. Most people, your neighbors, don't get upset if you're attracting birds, unless you're attracting vultures. There's some debate because it is unnatural. And there's this idea that we should let nature be nature, which sounds great, but I don't know about where you live, but where I live, okay. When I lived in Massachusetts, there wasn't exactly huge amounts of natural area nearby. We've destroyed an awful lot of the natural area worldwide. And so there's not a lot of natural area for them to survive in. The birds, the species visit feeders most tend to be the commonest species. So you're not attracting species that are rare and endangered as much as you are attracting the ones that are the most common. Yeah, people will argue that they need to know how to survive on their own. Frankly, bird feeding in the backyard is supplementing their wild diet. Wild birds don't subsist entirely on bird seed. So, like I said, there's not a lot of controversy. There's some people who try and argue this. The argument that I've heard that is the biggest concern is disease spread. And the disease can be spread by dirty bird feeders. And because you concentrate the number of birds in an area. So we've talked about how important it is to feed food bowls for captive birds. Do you clean your bird feeders regularly? I do. But a lot of people don't. And so that's a concern. The other thing is feeders often bring a lot of birds to a close area. So these birds are closer to each other than they would be if there was a natural situation, which means they can spread diseases to each other. So if you see a sick bird, take the feeders down for a couple of weeks. Clean them just like you would if they were your pet bird's food bowls. And then hang them back up. A sick bird is probably not going to survive for very long. Now, right now, there is a problem in the US with avian flu. It's been going through the chickens, and it's a risk for wild birds. So states that have avian flu, people are being asked to take down bird feeders right now. And that does include Massachusetts. this will probably it'll probably need to stay down for a good month until avian flu has, kind of petered out. So if you are currently feeding birds, you might need to take the feeders down for a while. So I don't know about you, but when the bird feeder is empty, I don't always have the time or the willpower to clean it. So I have 2 feeders. One is in use, and the other is the one that I have a little bit of time to clean it and let it dry before I hang it again. Okay. Moldy seed can be an issue. It can cause illness. Just like if your bird's seed, if you're not sure how fresh your bird's seed is, you can do that paper towel trick. You can tell how fresh the bird seed is. Remember the paper towel trick? I've got Mary nodding. I've got a yes in the comments. Good. Excellent. Okay. The other thing that can happen is you can, oops. Okay, I have a direct message. Somebody wants me to go over the paper towel trick. All right, so to tell if seed is fresh, you get 2 damp paper towels, place the seeds on one, cover it with the other wet paper towel. They should sprout within a couple of days. If they don't sprout within a couple of days, the seed is probably not fresh enough and it should just be, chucked. Okay. Feeding birds can increase the population of birds that are considered pest species. So things like red-winged blackbirds and English sparrows. Those can empty the feeder so quick. Every spring when I was in Massachusetts, I would take the feeders down as soon as I saw the first red-winged blackbird in my backyard. And I would keep them down for about 2 weeks until all the blackbirds started their breeding season and kind of dispersed and started having territories. Because literally I could hang the feeder and an hour later it would be empty. So that's it's expensive and they leave a lot of mess when they do that. And so that can be a problem. The mess can be feces, spilled seed holes. Different kinds of feeders attract different kinds of birds. You can reduce these sorts of problems, but never completely eliminate them. Okay. Screenshot if you want it. The other thing is feeding the birds attracts things other than birds. And generally we're talking about squirrels, mice, rats, raccoons, bears, and free roaming cats. The cats aren't attracted to the bird seed. They're attracted to the birds that are attracted to the bird seed. They're attracted to the mice and the rats that are attracted to the bird seed. So how much of a problem is this? A lot of it depends on your own tolerance for this sort of thing. So I don't see raccoons at my feeder. I don't see squirrels at my feeder. I see squirrels on the ground under my feeder. I haven't seen any skunks in my yard. So, you know, if I'm not seeing them, I'm not smelling them, I'm not seeing evidence of them, I'm not too worried about them. If you live in bear country, yes, skunks are attracted to bird feeders. Yeah, they'll eat bird seed. Absolutely. Bears will too. So if you live in bear country during the spring, right after bears wake up from hibernation, and in the fall, right before they start hibernating, those feeders need to come down. Your tolerance may be higher for these kinds of potential pest animals than others. If you're attracting skunks, your neighbors might get upset. Your neighbors might then put out poison or try and get the skunks trapped. Bad news for the skunks. Bears, a bear that is comfortable being around people is a real danger, both to people, to property, and to themselves. Because once they start getting comfortable around people, well, they say a fed bear is a dead bear, and it includes bird feeders. Yeah, a lot of places in Maine have bears around. I like bears, but I like bears in the wild. So those can be other things that can be attracted to the bird feeders in your backyard. So what do you feed wild birds? Feeding wild birds is different from feeding your pet birds. So seeds are easy. They're relatively cheap. There is an issue with hulls. We talked about those. Those are the inedible cases around the outside of the seeds. Those seed hulls, if they are sunflower, those inhibit plant growth, and they're very, very messy. So we saw in the previous picture, the one with the skunk, there wasn't any grass underneath the bird feeder. And that was because sunflower seed hulls killed all the grass off. So they do sell what's called no mess blends. These are what I use. So there are sunflower, there's the inside of sunflowers, but they've already taken the hulls off for you. They're a little more expensive, but a lot less messy. You want to avoid mixes with corn. Corn can have a toxin that can be harmful to birds. This is dried corn. This is not like corn on the cob. If you've got a pet bird, you know, corn on the cob is pretty safe for them. But the corn that ends up in wild bird food is not always a good idea. Like I said, it can sometimes have a toxin. And many mixes will have fillers. And those include golden millet, red millet, and flaxseed. Basically, those are called fillers because most birds won't eat them. And so they just fling them all over the place. So that can be an issue. All right, so sunflower seeds are very popular with a lot of birds. Like I said, I get the no mess blend. It has sunflower seeds that don't have the holes on them anymore. Peanuts can often be popular with the corvids, so crows, ravens, blue jays. So a lot of times people will put out just a few peanuts for the crows. You don't want to feed lots of peanuts to the crows because they'll eat all the peanuts you put out. But it's a way to make friends with the crows in your neighborhood. All right, so if you need a screenshot of this, there are types of millet that are good that the birds like to eat, but the golden and the red, not as much. Then there's Niger seed. That's what's being fed here. These are very, very small seeds. And they are great for goldfinches. Most birds larger than a goldfinch won't come to Niger feeders because the seeds are so small, it's not worth their effort, but they're the perfect size for goldfinches. They can leave a huge mess under the feeder, however. Again, it's the seed holes that are a problem. There's also suet, which is a soft food, high in protein. It's really good for things like woodpeckers, nuthatches. Some other birds will come. Right now, I've got titmice coming to my feeders, coming to my suet feeder. I think it's because they have babies and they need high protein food for the babies. You can buy special feeders like this one. Squirrels will also eat suet like crazy. So you've got to make sure that the suet is not easy for the squirrels to get to. So a feeder like this, where the birds like woodpeckers and nuthatches that tend to cling to the side of trees, they can hang upside down and eat off of it. You can also take a piece of log and drill some good sized holes in it and form the suet into plugs into those holes. They make suet specifically designed to spread on tree trunks. It's called bark butter. It does stain bark, but I haven't ever heard of it harming the tree. There is a serious fight going on in my front yard. I've been watching it for a few minutes. There's a crow and there's a mockingbird, and the mockingbird is trying to chase the crow off. Highly entertaining, very distracting. Okay, you can purchase suet. You can also make your own suet. 1 part peanut butter, 1 part Crisco, not low fat or low calorie Crisco, the old fashioned high calorie fatty stuff. 2 parts cornmeal, 2 parts oats. You melt the peanut butter, the Crisco, you mix it all together and use those plastic Tupperware containers that are designed for sandwiches. And those will form a chunk that's basically the right size to go in one of these feeders. What is Crisco? Crisco is a solid vegetable oil. It's kind of white, and it's often used in cooking. And it's used in baking. Yeah, it's kind of like lard. Yep. Okay, so that's suet and Niger. So the suet, again, you can make up a big batch, put it in Tupperware, stick it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. All right, did everybody get their screenshot? Now, you can also feed fruit. This is going to be messier. It may attract orioles, like this beautiful bird right here. These are beautiful, brilliantly colored birds. They don't commonly come to a typical seed feeder. Butterflies will also sometimes be attracted to fruit. Yeah, unfortunately, there will also be a lot of things like flies and bees and wasps can be attracted to fruit. This is messy, has to be replaced daily. And it needs to be relatively secured, because really a squirrel's going to come up here and he's going to take that half of an orange and he's going to take it up the tree with him. So you want to make sure that it is secured enough that it would be hard for a squirrel to take it away. Okay. That's food options. So if you want a screenshot of this one, if you want to do something significantly less messy, water. All birds need access to water for drinking and bathing. So a lot of times a bird bath will attract species that don't normally come to a feeder. So like these grosbeaks here. These guys are not often seen at feeders, but you can tell they like this bird bath. This is a heated bird bath. There's an electrical cord coming down right here. Heated bird baths keep the water warm enough so that it doesn't freeze. It's still very cold. It's not like it's bringing it up to sauna temperature. But in the wintertime in Massachusetts or other parts of New England, a heated bird bath is a beacon for birds to come. They just absolutely flock to a heated bird bath because a lot of the other sources of water frozen over. So it's a great way to attract birds in the winter. Yeah, just like everything else, got to clean them. So you want to clean with a dedicated brush and rub it out at least weekly, more often if you start seeing stuff growing in it. And during summer, mosquitoes can lay their eggs. Mosquitoes. So eggs and larvae may end up in bird baths. So you want to keep an eye on it. Dump it out regularly to prevent that. It helps if you have something that moves the surface of the water. So I've got a little solar powered fountain. That's enough movement that the mosquitoes don't want to lay their eggs in it. Yeah, birds will also get in swimming pools, especially ducks. Yep. Moving water is often more attractive to birds than still water. So the fountain that I have, it's right outside my office window, and I see hummingbirds coming through. They come through the fountain part of it, and they'll drink from it, and as well as use that for bathing. It's important that the floor is not too smooth. So if the floor is not really rough, you can place a rock for the birds to perch. Birds don't like to go straight into deep water. So they like to have shallow areas with a nice sloping floor so they can kind of gradually get into the deeper water. Once they're more familiar with your bird bath, they've come to it before, they know how deep it is, they'll go into it a lot faster. And as far as location goes, where you place a bird bath is going to impact what species show up. Some species like to be in the open. Some like there to be shelter nearby, like some shrubs. Some like the bird baths to be on the ground. Some like them to be elevated. So there's lots of different types of birds that come to different kinds of feeder of bird baths. I have 4 bird baths in my yard, and it's amazing to see the differences in which species prefer which bird bath. It's really, really interesting. Okay, so that's bird baths. So screenshot if you need it. Now you can even go more natural and have natural food and shelter. So you can choose plants, if you have a yard, that are going to attract birds. Things like hollies, although you need a male and a female holly bush, fruit trees, some species of viburnum. Not everything that has bright berries will attract birds. So you want to make sure that if you're looking for bird attracting bushes, you want to make sure you get the right kinds of bushes. Birds will also eat seed heads on perennial plants. This is probably an echinacea right here. That's a popular one to eat off of. So if you have a garden and you have wild or things like echinacea, leave the flower heads on all winter and the birds will come and eat off of those. And having shelter with bushes that have a nice dense area, that can provide nesting locations, and it can provide protected areas for fledglings. So that's very popular as well. Okay, there's not really anything to screenshot on this one. All right, so hummingbirds. A lot of people want to attract hummingbirds, and these are not very messy. You can attract them if you've got a little deck or a patio. The feeders don't take up a lot of space. It can take a little while to attract hummingbirds to a location where they haven't been fed before. But if you keep feeding year after year after year, you can increase the local population in your area. So again, here's the formula. It's very important that when you're using sugar, you're using real sugar, not sugar substitutes. So don't use things like stevia or monk fruit sugar. Those are not going to work. Do not use red food coloring. Your bird feeder should be red, but the food should not. That red food coloring, it's fine for us, but it's hard on a little tiny hummingbird's kidneys. So Please don't do that. You microwave it until it's boiling, let it cool. You can store it in the refrigerator. I know people who have been feeding hummingbirds so long that they make this by the gallon and leave it in the fridge. It should be room temperature when you feed, however. These are my favorite shape of feeders because they are so easy to clean compared to those tall, skinny bottles. The red part comes off, the hanging part comes off, and you can really get in there and scrub it good. More ornate, fancy looking hummingbird feeders, not a great choice. A lot of those are just really hard to clean. And it does need red color on it. This one has built-in bee guards. So these red flower shapes are basically there to keep the opening small enough that the bees can't really get into it and get food. If you have a different kind, sometimes the bee guards come separately. If you use bee guards, they need to be red. Sometimes you see bee guards that are yellow. The color yellow attracts bees. So you don't want those, you want the red ones. Ants can be a problem. They can come down from above, but this area right here is a little moat. So there's a little shallow area that water can fit in, and that water can stop the ants. If you let it dry out, the ants can come and get in through these flower openings. Sugar water is a great way to grow molds and bacteria. So you need to change the feeder and clean them regularly, especially in hot weather. So you're going to have to keep an eye on it and kind of figure out how fast the mold is growing and change these out regularly. Hummingbirds also like certain kinds of flowers. They like red flowers, especially flowers with a tubular shape. You can grow them in hanging baskets. You can plant them in the yard. If you're looking for something, go to a garden center, especially late summer, and see what the hummingbirds are feeding from and buy some of those. Hummingbirds are migratory in New England. So most of the hummingbirds that you see in New England are what are called the ruby-throated hummingbirds. And it's over 99%. It's a rare thing for a different species to show up. They generally arrive in April, so they should be arriving now. It's a good idea to put the feeders out at the beginning of April and leave them out until the nights are routinely reaching freezing temperatures. There's a myth that if you leave the feeder up, they won't migrate. Yeah, that's not true. The cold weather will convince them to migrate. You can find maps of spring migration on the internet. So there are sites that will show where the ruby-throated hummingbirds have shown up. So you can kind of watch them and get an idea of when to expect them. You're going to see the most hummingbirds in the late summer because the parents are feeding the babies and the fledglings are starting to come to the feeder. So that's when you're going to see the most hummingbirds. This picture is kind of unusual. In my experience, it's unusual to see more than one hummingbird at a hummingbird feeder at a time. They're very territorial and very aggressive about protecting their feeders. So normally, one of these would chase the other two off. Okay, so that is hummingbirds. Any questions about hummingbirds? Nope. Okay. Oh, I haven't written anything on here. All right. How do they survive with so much sugar? Hummingbirds have to consume a lot of sugar because they burn energy so fast. So remember way back at the beginning of the semester, we talked about torpor, which is a resting state where the heart rate goes down, the body temperature can drop. Hummingbirds have to do that every night or they would starve to death overnight. And they'll do it sometimes during the day. So they just really burn through sugar fast. And they eat things other than hummingbird solution. So they also eat very small insects. And flower nectar often has things other than sugar in them. So the sugar from a hummingbird feeder it's energy. It's not a complete diet for them. Okay. Wanted to talk a little bit, since we're talking about wild birds and we're talking about, we've been talking about problems and stuff. I wanted to talk about invasive birds. So the term invasive species does not always seem to have the same definition. So the scientific definition is a species that is not native and has established a population in an area. So for birds, that means a non-native species that is breeding in a specific area. As a general rule, invasive species, a lot of them don't do well. A lot of them don't get firmly established. And so that's not a big deal, but some of them can cause problems for the native wildlife. And sometimes these problems can literally drive native species to extinction. There are around 100 non-native birds that have established populations in the US. A lot of these have very small populations. The vast majority of them are in the Los Angeles area and the Miami area. Look at this bird. Do you know what this bird is? Crows are not invasive. Crows are native. If you saw this bird, would you go, wow, that's a beautiful bird? I would. They're gorgeous. That's the starling. Lots of people hate starlings. So we're going to talk about starlings and probably next time. All right. So if you need a screenshot, go ahead and take one. But we're going to start with these guys. These are house sparrows, also known as English sparrows. Even though they're not from England originally. All right. So these are strongly associated with humans. They like urban areas. They like farms. They like suburbs. They originally came from the Middle East. And they followed the spread of agriculture. So about 10 to 12,000 years ago, agriculture really started to take off in what is now the Middle East. And as the crops and the concept of farming spread throughout Europe and Asia and Africa and India, these guys followed them. They followed the farms. They can survive on spilled grain and agricultural weed seeds. They're very comfortable around people. You will see them coming to feeders. Currently, they are on every continent on the planet except for Antarctica. And lots of islands have them as well. If you see why are they called house sparrows? Abigail, yes, you are exactly right. The name has to do with their association with humans. They like to be around houses. You can even find them living inside buildings. So factories, warehouses, the big box stores that sell birdseed, the big box pet stores, you will often see these guys inside those buildings. My favorite story, one was found in a coal mine, 2,100 feet below ground. That's a long way down there. I think that's, I should have written what that is in miles. Anyway, they are cavity nesters. And this is the problem that we have in the US. They will kick out other bird species to take over a cavity. And those species are things like bluebirds. They'll kick out chickadees. They'll kick out all kinds of things, even to the point of killing nestlings. So if you've got a nest of bluebirds and the babies have hatched and a pair of house sparrows comes along, they'll just kill the nestling bluebirds so that they can take over the nest. Oof. And we're going to have to stop. So that's the story of these guys. They are considered a pest species because they are competing with the native species for cavities, nesting cavities. So they can be a real problem. We're going to talk a little bit more next time about some other invasive species like starlings and the famous rock pigeon, and then we're going to talk about wildlife rehabilitation. So have a good couple of days. I will see you all next time.